Okay, this is a calligraphy video. Help get you guys started. These are the pins that if you come in, you'll get one of these. If you take off the cap, you'll notice that these are real thin in one direction and they're thick in the other. This is what's called a C-nib. The end of the pin here, that is called a nib, even on ballpoint pens. The writing point of any writing tool is called a nib. And they have different types of nibs. There's A nibs, which are kind of round, and then there's these C nibs and others. Generally speaking, calligraphy tends to use the C nib. So what you want to do is get in the practice of holding the nib at the right angle. So if you think of 90 degrees, for most calligraphy letter forms, what you want is a 45-degree angle on the nib, which means in this direction it's the thinnest line you can make, and then coming down at the opposite 45, that's the thickest line you can make. And it's not the most exciting thing, but what you want to do is practice just a bunch of mountains where you are keeping that nib angle consistent the same. And it's hard to see, but when I do calligraphy, I am not writing with my fingers. I'm writing more with my elbow and my wrist. And that helps keep my nib consistent, one, and it keeps my nib flat on the paper. One of the things I see from kids a lot is they get this 45 right, but when they start pulling down, the pin turns and lifts up, and then they don't get the thick line. They end up getting a line like that because the nib is no longer flat on the paper. And that's one of the things that I found, that if I write more with my wrist and elbow, moving my whole arm, I am able to keep that nib flat on the paper. So my advice is to do just a whole bunch of those. And I don't know if you can see, but I've got the lined paper that you will be getting, and I am putting a clean sheet of printer paper on top. And you can see the lines through a little bit, just enough that it'll help keep all your writing nice and straight, and helps. It just helps. So once you've done a lot of that, there are really 4 basic strokes that you need to learn in calligraphy. All letter forms use these basic strokes, little variations of them, but basically the stroke that I'm about to show you. So first off is the horizontal. And with this, I like to start by pulling up a little bit, just a little quick tick up, and then I pull straight across, keeping my nib flat, and then I finish with a little tick up. So I do a lot of those to warm up. It's really cold this morning and I'm shaking, so my lines aren't all that neat and straight, forgive me, but should be. Yeah, see my nib rolled up on me there. Okay, whole bunch of those. There we go. Now you're seeing what I'm doing. And then you have your verticals, which is basically the same, only this time I'm pulling down, straight down, down at an angle, straight down, finishing at an angle. I'm going to practice a bunch of these. Phew. I'm really not doing very well today. My lines are shaky. So you do the horizontal, you do the vertical, and then you have the curves going both ways. So pull, 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 and this actually creates kind of a cool pattern that you can use as like edging on any work you do. It just is kind of a pleasant little design element. So you want to practice a lot of those as well. So you hear me say pull a lot, and that's what you want to do with the calligraphy pen. You can get away with pushing on the ones that you're getting because they're felt tip. But if you really like calligraphy, they do have the metal nibs, which are really high quality calligraphy pens. A little bit of a pain to keep clean, but they do an excellent job. But the way they're designed is the nib, it's metal, and there's a little hole up on the nib that the ink comes out of a reservoir, goes to the hole, and then there's a little slit in the nib that allows the ink to get down to the end. Now, if you get in the habit of pushing your pen, what happens generally is one of these pieces, and some have 3 instead of 2, some of them look like this, depending on the size. Sometimes one of these metal segments gets stuck in the paper as you're pushing it, and then all of a sudden it snaps back into position and it'll spray ink all over what you're doing. So it's best to just get in the habit of always pulling your strokes. Well, that means you cannot write a letter form in one continuous stroke. So let me explain this. If I was going to do a Chancery cursive B, I'm going to have a stroke that looks like that. And it's a little variation of this curve. I'm just not taking it all the way around. Then I'm going to have a stroke that comes across like this, and it finishes with the curve. So it's a combination of this with this at the end. Then I have a vertical element that is going to do this, which is that. And then I have another curved element that comes around and does this. And then I typically finish it off with one that does this. Now, it doesn't look much like a B until I put them all together. So I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and I'll have my Chancery cursive uppercase B. So that's what you want to do with all your letters. Lowercase a is basically 1, 2, 3, good hand-eye coordination, 1, 2, 3, and there's my lowercase a. I don't want you to worry about doing any of the letter forms today. If you have this stuff at home, I want you to just work on practicing those basic strokes. Work on getting those down, and once you have that, everything else will fall into place, including the really fancy Gothic, the Old English. So uppercase B again, 1, 2, 3, you see the basic strokes. Then a little variation on the curve where instead of curving it, I'm going to make it sharper. Straight line, coming in, come down, doing that, and then I can get fancy and do all kinds of what's called engrossing on the edge of it and create a really fancy B. But hopefully you're getting the idea. You are not trying to do the letter in one stroke. You're breaking it down into the pieces, putting the pieces together, and that's where the hand-eye coordination comes in. You want to make everything match up nice and neat. We'll get into the letter forms more next week. When we get to the uncial hand, the one thing there is we do change our nib angle. Instead of 45, we'll be working at a 30-degree angle. So your mountains aren't true triangles. They're more like wedge-shaped things like that. So that is what we're going to be doing over next week, which is a very short week. Make sure you're looking at the quotes of note unit cover and checking out links to the lessons that I have there on the days we're doing them. So hopefully you looked at the vocabulary terms that we covered yesterday. So there you go. That's where we're headed.